All right, so you think you know modern China, huh? The skyscrapers, the tech, the whole economic powerhouse thing.
Everyone's got an opinion on China these days.
But today, we're going deep on the guy who built that powerhouse. And trust me, his story is way more interesting than the headlines let on.
Deng Xiaoping, right?
Yeah.
The man, the myth, the enigma, wrapped in a tunic suit.
Exactly. And you want to know the craziest part? Hated talking about himself, never wrote an autobiography, actively avoided the spotlight.
Which, let's be honest, just makes digging into his life even more fascinating. It's like, what is he not telling us?
Exactly. And thankfully, we don't have to rely on rumors and whispers. You brought the goods with these excerpts from Ezra Vogel's biography, Deng Xiaoping and the Transformation of China.
Oh yeah, Vogel's work is essential for understanding this period. He really gets into the nitty-gritty of Deng's decision-making, the pressures he faced, the sheer audacity of his vision for China.
And we're not shying away from the tough stuff either. This isn't just a highlight reel. This is about understanding the man who took China from the ashes of the Cultural Revolution to, well, the global force it is today.
And that's the key, isn't it? This isn't just about one man's life. It's about understanding a pivotal moment in history. The world Deng inherited was completely different. The China he shaped is still shaping us.
Absolutely. So to kick things off, let's paint a picture of that world. Post-Mao China, a nation in flux. What's the lay of the land here?
Well, imagine a country reeling. The Cultural Revolution had just ripped through society, leaving scars that ran deep. Factionalism within the CCP was rampant, the economy was a mess, and there was this huge question mark hanging over everything. What now? Where does China go from here?
And into that maelstrom steps Deng Xiaoping, a man who, by all accounts, was more interested in results than ideology.
Oh yeah, pragmatism was practically his middle name, not driven by dogma, but by this constant focus on what actually works.
And that's what we'll be exploring, right? How did Deng's pragmatism, his experiences, his understanding of power allow him to make these incredibly consequential decisions for China? Decisions that still reverberate today. It's easy to forget, these figures we talk about, they weren't born into history books. They had whole lives before the decisions that made them famous.
Oh, absolutely. In Deng's early years, they were anything but ordinary.
Right. Like, picture this. 1920s, young Deng Xiaoping, barely a teenager, ends up in France.
Not exactly a typical Parisian vacation, though.
Not even close. He's working, studying, trying to make sense of a world completely different from rural China.
And this is key, right? While Mao Zedong, his contemporary, is coming of age in a China steeped in tradition, Deng's getting a crash course in industrialization, in Western thought, in a totally different political system.
Van Vogel really emphasizes this, how these formative experiences in France would go on to shape Deng's worldview.
For sure. Like, imagine young Deng on the factory floor, rubbing shoulders with French laborers. Vogel even talks about this nickname he gets, Dr. Mimeograph.
Dr. Mimeograph, seriously.
Apparently, he was cranking out propaganda leaflets for the fledgling Chinese Communist Party.
So, already a propagandist in the making, but also, I imagine, learning a lot about how different systems work, the realities of life for everyday people in a totally different kind of society.
Exactly. It's not just theory for Deng. He's seeing the struggles, the disparities, the complexities of a system grappling with its own contradictions.
And these experiences in France, they stay with him, right? Even when he goes to the Soviet Union a few years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep in mind, this is the Soviet Union in the throes of rapid industrialization with all the upheaval and, let's be honest, brutality that entailed.
He's seeing firsthand the challenges of building a communist state, the successes, but also the very real human costs.
It's a stark contrast to what a lot of his comrades back in China are thinking, this idealized vision of the Soviet model.
He's developing a more nuanced perspective, more pragmatic maybe, realizing there's no one-size-fits-all approach to revolution or nation building.
And this is going to be crucial later on, this ability to separate ideology from practical consideration.
Right, because it's not about dogma for Deng, it's about finding what actually works to make China strong.
And to find what works, sometimes you have to be willing to learn from anyone, even your supposed ideological rivals. And that's something Deng, throughout his life, never shied away from.
So we left off with Deng, shaped by these really unique experiences, this global perspective. And then, of course, China goes through the single most tumultuous period in its modern history, the Cultural Revolution.
It's almost impossible to overstate how devastating that period was. Just the sheer scale of social and political upheaval.
And Deng's right in the thick of it, but he's not just a passive observer. His family gets caught in the crosshairs.
Yeah, Vogel doesn't sugarcoat that at all. Deng's son, Deng Pufang, ends up targeted by the Red Guards, suffers a horrific fall, and is left permanently disabled.
It's a chilling reminder that for Deng, this wasn't just abstract political theory. This was deeply personal. His own family torn apart by the chaos.
And yet, he navigates it. Somehow he survives the purges, the betrayals, the constant fear. And what's even more remarkable, he comes out of it with this even stronger conviction that China needs stability, not more ideological zealotry.
Okay, so the Cultural Revolution ends, Mao dies, and there's this power vacuum. How does Deng, after being sidelined, manage to maneuver his way back to the center of power?
It's a masterclass in political strategy, really. He starts building alliances, consolidating support, but always with this eye toward practicality.
So instead of getting caught up in revenge or more purges, he's already thinking about the next phase, right? Rebuilding, modernizing.
Exactly. He knows China's lagging behind, and he's seen firsthand what's possible.
Cue the whirlwind global tours.
Yeah.
Japan, Singapore, even the United States. It's like he's on a mission to download as much knowledge as possible.
And it's not just symbolic visits either. Like Vogel talks about how Deng was obsessed with Japanese factories. He saw their efficiency, the technology, and he's thinking China needs this, and fast.
And then there's Singapore. I mean, talk about a curveball. Here's this tiny island nation thriving as a capitalist economy right under the nose of communist China.
Deng was fascinated by it. He meets with Lee Kuan Yew, sees how they're using these special economic zones to attract foreign investment. It's like he's reverse engineering their success.
It all points back to that pragmatism, doesn't it? He's willing to learn from anyone, even ideological opposites, if it means a stronger China.
And that's the Deng paradox, right?
Right.
He sets China on this path of economic liberalization, opening up to the world, but at the same time, never lets go of the CCP's grip on power.
Which, of course, brings us to Tiananmen Square, that dark chapter that still looms large over his legacy.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that Deng's vision for China had its limits. Economic progress was paramount, even at the cost of political freedom.
And it's that tension that we still see playing out today, right? The legacy of a leader who is both a pragmatist and a ruthless authoritarian, who lifted millions out of poverty but crushed dissent without hesitation.
It's a complicated legacy, one that Vogel grapples with throughout the book. But one thing's for sure, Deng Xiaoping's decisions continue to shape our world, and understanding his life, his experiences, is essential if we want to make sense of where China is going next.
So there you have it, Deng Xiaoping, the architect of modern China, a man of contradictions, of ambition, of undeniable impact. If you want to dive deeper into his story, and we highly recommend you do, pick up a copy of Ezra Vogel's Deng Xiaoping and the Transformation of China. It's a journey worth taking, trust us.